Make no mistake, what we're dealing with the paranormal, supernatural, with aliens, they're all connected. They're all intertwined. They're all from a central origin. This, and many other people believe, is exactly what we're dealing with.
You alright? You alright, baby?
Phil walks the tree line when the sun goes down. Boots in the gravel on the edge of town. Backpack rattles with a lantern and a map. Looking for the thing
behind it. And then 2 3-foot tall, 3.5 foot tall guardians with glowing red eyes were there.
Boys been chasing shadows in the midnight grass. But Phil just smiles at the cold night air. 'Cause something out there knows he's there. In the rustle of leaves.
I've experienced everything from angels to demons to ghosts to all kinds of other things I can't explain. I had my first Bigfoot encounter back around 2012 or something like that.
Chasing ghostly echoes in the pale moonlight, from forgotten forests to the deserts deep, where the old bones hide and the spirits creep. With a camera and courage and a trail to see, he'll follow any legend through eternity. Yeah, the world's full of whispers most folks never see, but they all know.
I think disclosure is inevitable for one simple fact. This is true. UFOs are real. You can ignore the truth, you can distort it, you can hide it, you can lie about it, but you will never destroy it.
Lights dancing in a cold black sky. Track band branches where the tall grass sways. Heard something breathing in the forest.
A guy standing next to my bedroom door, only at night, and he stood there, and I was 3-4 years old, and my mom thought I was crazy.
And when the fire burns low and the coyotes sing, you can bet he's hunting something strange again. Through the static and dark, through the myth and the lore.
Obviously, I believe that these things exist after the stuff I've seen. So you can't say to someone who's seen stuff, these things aren't real. Obviously, you know. But yeah, people keep telling me they're not real, but I know they are.
running wild and free.
Oh, hello. Don't know what happened there. Phil running wild and free. I think the only time I've run recently is when a fiver flew out of my pocket in the wind, and I did run then, I must admit. Hope you're keeping well, and thank you very much for joining. This is the Friday Night Files, hosted on Dogman Teepee Hunting channel on YouTube. We have Steve Ward on this week. Now, Steve Ward is from the States, and he works in the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant. Interesting guy. I wanted to delve more into the enigma of Mothman and also flying cryptids as a whole, to be honest, because Mothman is the tip of the iceberg. It really is. It goes an awful lot deeper. That's just, if you like, the cherry manifestation on the paranormal cake. Mothman was. There's an awful lot of build-up before the sightings actually happened. And like a lot of things, things that we see are snippets, parts of a bigger picture. It's just realizing what that picture is. And it seems to go in stages. So you may not get something for an awful long time, and then all of a sudden, bingo, bango, you get a whole series of sightings, whether that be UAP, strange drone sightings, paranormal. It comes in clusters, and it's really a case of finding out the pattern, which we're quite good at. We like patterns, we like things to fall into a pattern, like AI does, because AI is originally built by us, and of course, because it's built by us, it has the methodology which we gave it, and finding patterns with AI is what it's very good at, and referencing very quickly vast quantities of information. But years ago, as this program goes on towards the end, I'll show you what the old school people, right from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the patterns they knew, because they knew stuff that we don't know. We still can't understand. And it's all pertaining to what's happening now, because it's still happening. It's still cycling around all of this paranormal. So I'm going to bring Steve Ward on. It's going to be an informal chat. It's just as like we're going to be meeting in a coffee shop for a chat, and we've got a whole load of people sitting around on tables listening, and you're very, very welcome. I'm pleased you made it. All the comments, if you've got any questions, stick a big Q, capital Q in front, okay? That way, Roxy, the admin, will be able to pick out. Also, we've got Kate moderating, Dawn, Sasquatch Sister moderating, Larry, and Keith as well. Thank you very much for the job and the work that you do. Right, so you've got the comments on the screen. Okay, I may swap the screen over a little bit, but you'll see why. Okay, right, I'm going to bring Steve on. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, Steve. I'm going to move you over. There we go.
Great to be here.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, it's great having you on. It's great having you on because we haven't really covered anything to do with Mothman, as such, really. So it's an interesting subject. It's something which we really once again, it's an enigma. We don't know. We don't know what it is. We don't know. We've heard a lot of stories and accounts where they appear at times of imminent disaster. But then you have the same thing, don't you, Steve? With like in the UK of Black Shook, this phantom black dog, which frequents cemeteries and burial mounds, and anyone that sees it with glowing red eyes, it spells doom and disaster for anyone. Did you, in your early days, were you? Did you have paranormal happenings that happened to you as a kid growing up, or?
Pardon me. No, I didn't have anything like that. I had quite a vivid imagination. We had a local theater just a few blocks away called the Radio City, not the one in New York City, of course. And they would show often a science fiction film and a Western, a bunch of cartoons and short selected subjects for a quarter back in those days. And often the science fiction film would fuel my imagination or our playtime, whatever kind of monsters we were going to defeat to save the planet Earth again. So I never had any. No, I was just a kid. I was afraid of the dark. My dad finished off the attic upstairs, and I had my own bedroom. But at first, it was a little scary being up there alone. And like a lot of kids, my covers were magical and protected me from the monsters. But fortunately, I grew out of that sometime later, and that was fine. But no, I've only had I've had very little in the way of experiences that one might call paranormal. So I have to listen to other people tell me their stories.
Okay. But what was there? So there's always been a fascination there by watching these movies, even some of the older ones, with the not so normal part of life, the supernatural, the paranormal side of life, the strange. There's always been a sort of a fascination there for you then.
Well, also, as a kid, I started reading these anthology books by Frank Edwards. Now, Frank Edwards was a radio announcer, became fascinated with the UFO problem, was a friend and colleague of Major Donald E. Kehoe, who was the head of NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And he wrote these. That's my first introduction to things like the Flatwoods Monster and the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins and so forth, and the Aztec encounter with the crash saucer and so forth. So those, and he covered everything. He had things like moving coffins. Now, I didn't like those chapters on moving coffins, so I wouldn't read them much. But so that was early on, and there were a few other influences, but the really big thing that happened to me was in 1966 in March. We had a wave of UFO reports in Michigan, where I grew up, and it also hit the Midwest. And this was the kind of the infamous one where Dr. J. Allen Hythe, who at the time was he had been an astronomer at Northwestern University and was the running Project Blue Book, which was the organ of the Air Force to investigate UFOs. It was more of a publicity thing where they're just trying to, convince the public that they were mostly misinterpretations and so forth. But he was dispatched to Michigan. And he had been a skeptic at first, but then he began to believe that there was really something to this. These people were credible. But unfortunately, there was a press conference. Now, I was just a kid, and I was actually watching this in real time. He did a press conference where he suggested that some of the sightings in Hillsdale, Michigan, might be swamp gas. Well, that's all the press needed. They ran to their phones, called their story in. UFOs were swamp gas. End of story. And just to put the postscript on this, 10 years later, I saw him speak in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where some of these sightings took place at the Weber Inn at the Mutual UFO Network Symposium. And by then, he had left Project Blue Book, started the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois, and wrote the book, The UFO Experience, where he first talks about the close encounter categories. But his name of his talk was Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. And it was a combination of very serious and also very humorous. He talked about some of the mistakes he had made before. But then, and this might lead us into the next segment, a few months later, November of 1966, was the first major Mothman sighting that took place. It hit the wire services all over the world, and that's why I read about it in Michigan. Back then, he didn't even have a proper name. It was just the bird, and it chased two couples down Route 62 out of what they call the TNT area on November 15th. I actually live on that same road right now. It's a little less paranormal these days, I think, but it's pretty cool to live on the same road that the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased by the Mothman.
Okay, right. How is the town? How do you think it's affected the town? With I know it's a good few years back, but I know it's still very obviously a sore subject with the silver, the bridge going,
right,
collapsing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wondered. Do you think that in any way, shape, or form, it could have been almost like a collective focus of thought? It's almost because of the bridge collapsing that the Mothman was a collective thought, if you like, egregore, something which was created to focus on blame.
Right, possibly. See, some people think that Mothman was a harbinger. Some think it caused the bridge disaster. Now, the bridge disaster happened 13 months to the day that the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased by the Mothman, December 15th, 1967, just after 5 p.m. in the evening and in the late afternoon. And a lot of people have different ideas. I personally don't think there's a direct connection. I think all this high strangeness just happened at the same time. The Silver Bridge, they said they examined it. They put it all back together after they pulled it out of the river. And but by the way, 46 people lost their lives that night on crossing the bridge. And just a couple blocks from, let me just hit the cough button here.
Mm-hmm.
Just having a little fun with allergies. But if you
go,
a
cough button's always good.
A couple blocks up the street from the Mothman Museum is where the bridge used to run on 6th Street over to Ohio. If you go there now, there's a mural, a memorial, and the 46 names of people that died are embedded on the sidewalk across the street. Now, when the bridge collapsed, it was devastating, not just because of the loss of life and property, but that was a main artery to get over to Ohio. You had to drive miles up and down the river at that time to get across. And businesses died. And again, it was not just everybody knew somebody that was on the bridge. It was just a small town of so many thousand. So some good friends of mine, Bill and Jackie Kuselis, have written a book called Bridging the Tragedy. And in there, they talked to many people that went through the aftermath of the Silver Bridge collapse and how it devastated the town, how they adjusted, and how many people had close calls I used to work in Michigan at a electrical wholesale place in South Central Michigan. I'd wear my Mothman t-shirts occasionally because I was going down to Point Pleasant all the time. And people would see that and they'd say, I crossed that bridge 2 weeks earlier. So many people had a point of reference to that terrible tragedy of that night. So and then it was 2 years later that they built a Silver Memorial Bridge just a few miles downriver, and which stands today. So just my personal opinion that these things just all happened at the same time, and many people disagree with me.
Okay. So when did this all happen? You were in Point Pleasant, was that right? Just to confirm.
I was in junior high school, I was, I don't know, 14, 15. I couldn't play UFO investigator because I didn't have a driver's license. But so I remember clearly the chase by some kind of a bird-like creature, some humanoid creature on November 15th in the newspapers. But I didn't watch the news much as a kid, unless I was over at my grandparents' house. So I did not actually register the time the Silver Bridge had collapsed. And I really wished I had been more attentive and more aware.
Yeah.
A man in 2017, the 50-year remembrance ceremony, and they have one every year in downtown Point Pleasant, and they read the names of the people that died. I talked to a man named Bill Edmondson, who had been driving a semi across the bridge that night, and he went down in the water, and he was able to escape through the. Actually, when he hit the water, he was forced through the passenger window, right arm first. His right arm became useless. He came to the surface. He grabbed onto some material that he had been hauling, and a tugboat captain saw him and picked him up out of the river. That was a pretty amazing experience to hear one-on-one. So, and imagine how, this is December 15th, filled with rush hour traffic, Christmas traffic, and the sun's almost down. The water had to be absolutely frigid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's when I've done a little bit of research into the accident, and I believe, as I understand it, there was actually traffic lights either side of the bridge to try and filter the traffic somewhat, but it was a very busy time of the evening. And both lights either side of the bridge were on green, so it had a full bank of traffic on that bridge at the time.
Right. I guess sometimes even the red light would get stuck, and people would just run the lights because they got used to the traffic lights being so slow.
Yeah.
And people told me that people that are with us today, that what the bridge was like crossing it. It was very, very, a lot of bridges move anyway. They're supposed to kind of relieve the stress. But this thing was really, really shaking. It was built in 1928 and wasn't really suitable for the heavy semis of the 1960s.
No, that's it. Yeah. As a kid, when you were in Point Pleasant as a kid, I get it, because kids. I mean, I didn't take much notice of the news, really. I didn't. There's certain things that kind of cropped up which drew me, drew my attention. But other than that, I wouldn't sit and watch the news because I just found it boring. So I get what you're saying. But was there any talk in amongst your family or relatives about some of the strange behavior that was going on with this flying cryptid? Was it a case of maybe an aunt or mother or father or whoever would be like, "Oh, tell you what, Steve," right? Or maybe you overheard them saying, "Yes, her down the road, yeah, she had something in the tree. She saw something in the tree." Was it anything like that you heard?
No, I was the one that kind of started to follow that stuff. From Frank Edwards, I went to Jim and Cora Lorenzen. They wrote those great books on humanoid encounters, and eventually I discovered John Keel, and John Keel did write about the events in Point Pleasant in the Ohio Valley long before he actually wrote the book. So that was where I started reading this stuff, and I have to say that when I discovered, I read Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which was retitled to The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. That's where Keel starts talking about window areas, trying to explain why these things sort of just pop in and pop out. And then, I resisted reading Operation Trojan Horse. That was the book. That's his grand opus that he wrote before the Mothman Prophecies, where he ties everything together. Cryptids, and I actually put off reading it for a couple of years because I was really stuck as an ET guy. I didn't want to hear about that these things were connected possibly to ghosts or apparitions. I wanted them to be coming from Alpha Centauri and Zeta Reticuli.
Yeah.
But after a while, Keel had made his case, and so I read that and adjusted to it, and then as a follow-up, I read Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia, where he makes connections between certain elements of folklore and some modern-day UFO experiences, and then I was just that took me the full way.
During when John Keel was he was fascinated by these accounts at Point Pleasant, and he came and spent some considerable time in Point Pleasant, evidently. At that time, there was a secretary of his, although he had no secretary that worked for him.
Yeah.
But there was this lady with a clipboard that people said used to turn up at their house and ask them quite detailed questions, personal questions. People asked who she was, and she said she was working as secretary. She was working for John Keel, but no one really knew who she was. John Keel didn't have a secretary working for her. Definitely not one going door knocking. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah. He writes about that in the Mothman Prophecies, and he had all kinds of harassment. He had some of it seemed to be possibly paranormal, reflective, or whatever. He talks about when people get really immersed in this, how the phenomena sort of reflects back on him. But part of this was actually very human intervention. There's in one of the anthologies of John Keel's collections, I'm not sure if it's the Great Phonograph in the Sky or Pulling Your Own String, but in there an interview is reprinted from one of the magazines from years ago. And he said that, and this is something I didn't know, that he had written back at that time a critical article on J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. Well, 2 weeks later, he started having a bunch of harassment with his phone and the IRS and so forth. Some of that seems to be chronicled in the Mothman Prophecies, but it's not. He doesn't talk about the government, J. Edgar Hoover there, and it might be because this is something else people should know. When the Mothman Prophecies was finally published, and he put this together reluctantly. He was done with the Mothman by the mid 70s. He didn't, so he took out his briefcase, pieced together a book, and nevertheless, what he calls faceless editors cut out half the book and left it on the cutting room floor. Now he salvaged some of that. So the J. Edgar Hoover stuff may have been in there initially. I don't know, but he salvaged some of that in the follow-up book, The Eighth Tower. So we still have some of that, some of his thinking, some of his investigations beyond that. So he was always having trouble with when John Keel met a couple of friends of mine back in 2003 at the Mothman Festival when they unveiled the Mothman statue, and he told them that he had terrible time with editors. The first edition of Trojan Horse had some really horrible mistakes in it with some of the numbers, and it just and of course back then you publish a book, it didn't sell very well. So when's the second edition going to come out where you can correct it? So he had a lot of problems with his writings being tampered with and just totally messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I found it very interesting with the accounts of this lady going around with a clipboard on behalf of John Keel, asking pertinent questions. And nobody really knowing who the hell she is, and still don't know who she was. I think I don't think it was. I think it. I'll tell you what it is. It is striking to me of the Men in Black. There's a lot of similarities between this lady, but very different, very distinct, but the same type of account, if you like, the same type of behavior. So I find that quite very odd. There's a lot of things with this Mothman entity that it's the lead up, Steve, the lead up to the actual point of it arriving in Point Pleasant, showing itself. And some time back, you had the Flatwoods monster, But just quickly to get back to that lady door knocking and Men in Black, there has been bogus callers in Australia and in the UK. There was a spate of them in the early 1990s. Reports emerged in the UK media concerning purported conduct of persons claiming to be social workers.
Yeah.
Most witnesses reported being visited by one or two women in their late 20s, early 30s who were dressed professionally. In some versions of these accounts, visits included a woman accompanied by a man who seemed to be acting in a supervisory role. Visits consisted of an inspection of the children in the household, during which the social worker displayed strange behavior. Claims about the nature of the examinations fed concerns that children were being sexually abused. I mean, the same thing happened in Australia in the early 1990s. It sort of like became a bit of an urban legend, but where you had these people visiting other people, but they were kind of like they disappeared into the mists, of urban legend, and that's a bit like this episode of John Keel, and his secretary. It goes back a long way with Mothman, and in that local area with the mysterious, going back to the 1950s. Could we speak a little bit about the Flatwoods monster and your understanding of it, Steve?
Yeah, it was just a really bizarre event. It's almost, in some ways, it's almost a standalone. And I have visited Flatwoods, and I'd gotten fairly close to the alleged landing site. There were some kids were just playing at the school. They saw this thing pass over like the beginning of a science fiction movie, this ball of light. They followed it to the hill that it crashed on, and they saw this this thing. Some people think it's a robot. Some think it was a spacesuit. Some people think it was a creature. And I forget, it's actually wasn't all that tall. I mean, the way to describe it, the height seems to have grown over with the telling, but it had sort of an ace of spades backing to its head. Some people describe the bottom as almost like not a dress exactly, but kind of a cone where it went around, and it gave off a very foul smell. Had, I think, orange glowing eyes, and there were several kids there and a dog. Some stories said that the dog died afterwards. Apparently, a researcher named Zelia Edgar found out the dog did not die, which makes me very happy, by the way. And so it was just and it was almost like some people say they saw something like that a couple days later. There's one woman I know of that said that years after that, in that same general area, they saw a Flatwoods-like monster, but was more like an apparition or a projection. So it's like so many of these things, you throw them together, and it's hard to make sense of them. So and then to throw something else in the mix, Nick Redfern wrote a book years ago called Monster Files. And in there, he talks about a famous magician who has a name I don't recall, and I don't know if I can pronounce it, even if I can recall it. He helped the military with creating subterfuge for the enemy. Supposedly, there was some kind of a monster-like thing he created in the hills of Italy during World War II to frighten the locals. And when you look at the description of it, it's very much like the Flatwoods Monster. Now, I don't know how to possibly reconcile that with what happened in September of 1952. But it's we don't have a lot of reports of Flatwoods-like monsters showing up. One researcher named Frank Ficino is firmly convinced it was an alien in a spacesuit. He chronicled that there were many sightings of UFOs, balls of light shooting across the skies around that time period, and the one that these kids saw was just one of many. So, but it's it happened in good old West by God, Virginia, with all the other strange stuff that happens here.
Yeah. It's I mean, there's similarities with the red glowing eyes, the Flatwoods Monster. There's similarities. I mean, obviously, a Flatwoods Monster didn't have wings.
No.
It was, and this is interesting. I find this very interesting. This part, it had a stench about it, a sulphurous, quite revolting smell attached to it.
Right.
Now a lot of these entities that appear seem to be accompanied by such a smell, which
Bigfoot?
does, yeah, Bigfoot for a start, and it has this almost like it's opened up a doorway, and it's kind of the smell has followed it through the doorway. It's kind of part of the arrival process. It's part of how it came here. The part of the process is this byproduct, this smell. And I think also it's a case that a lot of these entities are darker entities. Would you say that they? What's your sort of opinion on these entities? Do you think that they are dark creatures from the point of view of satanic almost? Do you think that they are godly creatures that are maybe part of nature? Do you think, on the flip side, that they're part of nature, undiscovered? Or do you think that they are unearthly or evil creatures?
Pardon me. I tend not to believe in literal demons. However, there is a negative aspect to this realm that we're dealing with. I don't think John Keel believed that it was demonic, but he recognized the negativity that existed in much of this. Much has been written about, positive encounters, even angelic encounters with many people. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. He was in the opening of your broadcast. Come on. He wrote a book about 300 encounters with UFOs that were positive.
Yes. I'll reference that. Hold on, I'll find out for you.
I'm just an old guy that forgets a name sometimes. But anyway, but then there's the negative side. People are really terrified sometimes. Now, the Mothman never attacked anybody or harmed anybody, but did scare the hell out of a few people. But there's certainly, and when you get into the one aspect about the Mothman prophecies that a lot of people don't talk about, and I will be talking about it at the Mothman Festival on September 19th and 20th, when it occurs in downtown Point Pleasant. I will be talking about what Keel called the silent contactees. This is the prophecies side of the Mothman prophecies. These are people that believed that they were in contact with some kind of an entity, a space brother, if you will. And
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
and they
We've got a bit of a connection.
they were getting messages. They were getting predictions in some cases, and giving them directions, quests to go on that were pointless. So there was a real negative side to some of that.
Yeah.
And there's a negative side. It kind of flows into the Men in Black as well.
Yeah, I think I do think so as well. And there's an overlap with like the Men in Black for a start. Very often witnesses say that they'll come at odd times of the evening and the night time, but they cannot enter your property unless you ask them in.
Right.
And that doesn't kind of trigger in my head vampirism.
Right, exactly.
Vampires.
Right. Well, if you go back to a book called Demonolatry, I think by Nicholas Flamel, was it? He talks about, he was a witch hunter, I guess, and not a very nice guy, but he would talk about when witches were consorting with the demons. Some of these demons sound like Men in Black of yesteryear. They wore the black clothes, the black hat. Instead of a black Cadillac, they come in on a black horse. When they would speak, they didn't have vocal cords. So their voice would sound like it was being projected in front of them, like even some of the UFO pilots. They would have speakers or telepathy or nothing at all. So there is kind of a thread that goes through folklore and history that kind of connects them to something very, I don't know, and for lack of a better word, supernatural. But some of the Men in Black stuff is just, I'm sure, the government nosing around. There was a point in the Mothman prophecies where Mary Hythe, who was the reporter that John Keel worked with, friend and colleague, he went to her and said, "Mary, did you, is there a convention going on in town?" And she said, "I wondered the same thing. There are all these guys there in suits, skinny black ties, close cropped hair, and very, and no personality, which kind of maybe indicated they were from the government, probably just nosing around. And that secretary might have just been somebody that the government set out to find out what Keel was into. I mean, Keel was kind of a lightning rod for people to even though they would belittle him and not give him any credit for his research, he was still fascinating to the government, and I think they were very wary of him and wanted to know what he was all about. And on the other hand, there are some other so-called Men in Black reports that are just bizarre. And if they're not hoaxes, you have to wonder just what is really behind them.
I'm going to bring the website up for the Mothman Museum so people can have a little look. I mean, I'd love to. I would absolutely love to come over and have a look. It's one of my kind of bucket list places, really. There we go. Right. Okay. Let's have a look. So this is it. Does the museum, Steve, does it feature much in the way of the UFO side of things? Does it?
Yes.
What I'm trying to say, is it just dedicated Mothman, or does Jeff kind of get more of a rounded idea and have a lot of the stuff that happens with the UFOs and the build up and the sightings and the Men in Black? And
well, Jeff Walmsley is the man that founded the museum. He was 5 and 6 years old when all this stuff was going on. 5 years old when the Mothman sighting started. 6 years old when he was in his basement, way up on 30th Street, and he could actually hear the collapse of the Silver Bridge. His father took a lot of, I guess, 8mm film of the aftermath. Jeff has been collecting stuff all his life. He started out in a smaller building across the street. Now it's in a much bigger building, which keeps expanding. Now in there he has all kinds of articles talking about the Mothman sightings, the UFO sightings. He has many articles by Mary Hythe, again, was a reporter, a stringer for the Athens Messenger. She wrote a column called Where the Waters Mingle, and that relates to the Ohio and the Kanawha rivers that come together at Point Pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And she would chronicle the UFO sightings, the Men in Black encounters, and Mothman sighting, talking about the original sighting, the original chase, and it's very inclusive. It's just that there's so much stuff in there. To actually see everything, it would take you a long time. But you can also just breeze through it if you want. We have something like I think 4 right now running at the same time, and one of them is from the Learning Channel, I think, that covers the investigation on the collapse of the Silver Bridge. On the other side, there's one from the Travel Channel, a segment that talks about Indrid Cold. There's one or two playing at different times by Small Town Monsters, the Mothman of Point Pleasant, and the Mothman Legacy that are playing. And so then we have a separate viewing room where you can sit down, and the documentary they're showing there is the same one that came out about 2002 when the film came out. It's just, and there's just all kinds of things that relate to Mothman, pop culture, the history and so forth. It's, and then, next door we have the Point Pleasant Trading Company, where you can buy even more Mothman T-shirts and gifts. And if you go upstairs, you can play Mothman Blacklight Mini Golf, which I have not played, but I've walked through it. The graphics are phenomenal. And also, if you want to really test your mettle, we have a Mothman escape room. So, which I have not done. And I said, I'm not doing the escape room. I'm kind of known as the Mothman guy in some circles. If I fail, I'll never live it down. But anyway, and plus there's the history where you're surrounded by, American history and the legend of Chief Cornstalk and the Battle of Point Pleasant. I mean, and it's such a great, great town. You're right on the edge of the Ohio. There's the amphitheater there. You've got to come to the Mothman Festival sometime, even though we had over 30,000 people come through last year, that weekend. And it's just amazing. Hard to park, hard to find a place to stay, but they're working on that.
Okay, I'd love to come for the festival. I really would. I'd love to come over and see the festival. It'd be like, as I say, on the bucket list. So it's nicely. It sounds like the museum is nicely balanced. With bearing in mind with John Keel's High Strangeness.
Well, in the front part, we have like a gift shop where you can buy, your T-shirts, your Mothman related knickknacks, whatever. And we do have a nice little library there of books covering all kinds of aspects of Mothman, UFOs, and the paranormal. There's a lot of John Keel stuff there.
And also, it's nice to see, when I went on the website, you can actually go, there's a live cam of the statue outside of the Mothman statue. Yes. Yeah, I was fascinated with that. I was watching it for ages, actually. I was waiting for it to move,
When I'm there on weekends, I greet people and I answer their questions. But then if I go back and forth from the museum to the statue, and if they're out there by the statue, I'll take the whole family's picture. And then Well, maybe I shouldn't reveal this. I don't know. But, well, first thing is if you're standing in front of the statue and you look up to the second story window and you'll see a dreaded mannequin in black watching you with the fedora, the sunglasses, and the dark suit. If you go around behind the statue, the back part of the statue has become very famous, and it is known as his shiny hiney. Forgive me, but it has been quite an attraction. And when you go to the Mothman Festival, you'll find lines, a long line in front to take pictures and a long line in back. And what's funny is people will go back there and see the, excuse me, the shiny hiney. And sometimes they'll do horrible things back there I won't talk about. But then I'll tell them, oh, by the way, look up at that window up there. You see that camera? That's our 24/7 moth cam. They just saw you all over the world.
Interesting. You with one of the things that happens before Mothman was sighted at Point Pleasant was this disappearance of Neil Partridge's dog Bandit after they evidently the TV there was an interruption on the TV they were watching, the family were, and then the dog Bandit went crazy outside barking, and there was it said like herringbone pattern that appeared on the TV before it nearly exploded. All hell broke loose. That fascinated me, the herringbone part of it, because in a lot of times with occult circles and witchcraft and things like that, in the old days they used to have a herringbone pattern because it used to confuse the bad spirits. It used to discombobulate them. They couldn't understand, and it used to be on I went to a castle recently and there was a herringbone pattern at the base of every single fireplace. I'll show you. It's just a quick video. I'll show you one of them. We went up to the top, right to the top there. Yes, we did. Earlier today. Beautiful church. I'll be sorting that one out tonight. And this is an old ruin part of Tattershall Castle. So, yeah, having a great time. Got a lot of footage because there's a lot of folklore around here, evidently. Anyway, I just wanted to quickly show you this. Here. Right then. You see these lines here on the fireplace? These zig lines, yeah, all right. They are placed there, okay, to combat the case of witchcraft because it's open at the top, the chimney. If any bad spirits or bad mojo comes down, any witchcraft, they protect. Okay. Yeah, which I found very interesting. Little things like that, it's the small things. Which, you think to yourself, how did they know years ago? A lot of times in schools, when you go into schools, there used to be a lot of parquet. Nearly all the flooring was parquet flooring, which was blocks of wood, which were in a herringbone pattern,
Wow.
Which I believe also was done for a reason, protection.
Right.
I could be completely wrong. I'm just maybe grasping at too many straws, but it just seems a bit coincidental, really, to me. But yeah, with the case of Bandit the dog, what do you make of that?
One thing is you find out that he wasn't Newell Partridge; it was Merle Partridge, and Newell was a misprint on his birth certificate. So apparently when Gray Barker first reported, he's the first one to write a book. His book was The Silver Bridge. He called him Newell. I don't know why, because he actually met him. And of course, Gray Barker was the first one to investigate the Flatwoods Monster and wrote an article for Fate magazine way back when. But one thing is that when John Keel originally wrote about Merle Partridge's encounter, he got it correct. Merle Partridge did not see red glowing eyes, apparently. I think it was changed in the Mothman Prophecies. I think that there was some manipulation going on with some of the editors. I don't know. Maybe it was a mistake by Keel. I doubt it, but it could have been. But it turns out that in more recent years, Jeff Wamsley, again, the curator of the Mothman Museum and co-founder of the Mothman Festival, his first book was called Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend. And he re-interviews several of the original participants. And he interviewed Merle Partridge. Partridge said he did not see red glowing eyes. There were like red spinning lights that Bandit was circling around about and all fascinated about, and he disappeared. And then it was a couple days later, the Scarberries and the Mallets talked about a dead dog they saw on the side of the road. Now, this is a couple hours away from where Partridge was. I don't believe it was the same animal. That's just my opinion. Now, there were several other unfortunately, there were other animal attacks or mutilations or whatever. If you go across the river, go on the north side of Gallipolis, is Georges Creek Road. That was a road that had a lot of activity and UFO activity and so forth. Excuse me. John Keel writes about it in some of his articles, and you can find them in some of his anthologies. There were some what they call saucer nests or crop circles, if you will, found over there. One of them came down and seemed to have crushed a dog, and I hate to bring that up, but I just don't think it's the same animal that was attacked, and I don't know. Again, I don't know what to make of it. Partridge is vehement that they weren't red glowing eyes; it was more mechanical or whatever. But I can't imagine what would have happened to the dog. That's one of the things in this realm where the animal attacks, the animal mutilations, the disappearances are just kind of unsettling.
Very unsettling. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play for the audience I've done a little AI sort of a synopsis. Basically, it's an overview of some of the accounts that have happened in Point Pleasant, and I think that will give you a chance, Steve, just to have a drink, settle down, get your cough sorted. All right, it's only about 8 minutes long, but it'll just give a good overview for people, and then we can come back and then fire off with some questions and any questions that the people on the chat will have as well. Okay, I'll play this now.
Look, most of us know the legend, right? A towering, winged creature with glowing red eyes haunting a small West Virginia town back in the 1960s. It's inspired movies, books, the whole shebang. But what if I told you that this famous monster is actually just a tiny fraction of the madness? Today, we're diving deep into the whole terrifying picture of the Point Pleasant iceberg.
Because to truly get a grip on what went down in 1966, we have to look right past that famous winged cryptid and peer into the deeply weird events hiding just beneath the surface. We're talking about a massive, multi-layered iceberg of mystery here. Underneath the familiar Mothman story lies a chilling tapestry of telepathic visitors, government imposters, and vanishing pets. When a monster story is just the tip of the iceberg, well, the deeper you go, the more dangerous the waters become.
Section 1. The glowing red eyes and the missing dog. Let's start our descent with the classic monster setup, featuring a deeply visceral detail, glowing red eyes in the pitch dark. But this didn't happen to a group of teenagers out for a midnight joyride. No, it happened to a family man, just trying to relax in his own home.
Picture this. It's a cold Tuesday night on Newell Partridge's farm in Salem, West Virginia. The family is just hanging out, watching a movie, when out of nowhere, the television signal snaps into this fine, erratic herringbone pattern. The picture is completely gone. Then, this horrible, high-pitched whining noise fills the room. It builds and builds with such intensity that the TV literally explodes, showering the living room with glass. And right outside, Newell's German Shepherd Bandit starts howling wildly into the cold night. So Newell grabs his flashlight and steps out onto the porch to see what has his dog so incredibly spooked. Bandit is bolting toward the tree line, just barking fiercely. Newell shines his light into the darkness, but he doesn't see a raccoon or a stray animal. He spots 2 glowing red circles. He later said they looked exactly like large spinning bicycle reflectors. Bandit chased those unearthly eyes right into the pitch-black woods, leaving Newell paralyzed by this sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. The feeling was so intense, he actually went back inside and slept with a gun right beside him that night. And tragically, Bandit never came back. Now, the timing of Bandit's disappearance is where this goes from a sad local story to a major piece of the puzzle. Just track this sequence of events with me. Newell finds Bandit's tracks the next morning, running in circles before they just vanish into thin air. Then, the very next night, over 100 miles away in Point Pleasant, 2 young couples are chased at speeds topping 100 miles an hour by a massive winged humanoid with glowing red eyes. And what do they see lying on the side of the road as they're fleeing for their lives? A large, dead dog. A dog that looked an awful lot like Bandit.
Section 2. The Grinning Indrid Cold. But what if those glowing eyes weren't attached to a monstrous bird at all? What if they belonged to something from a completely different genre of mystery? Let's take another step down this iceberg, look away from the dark woods, and look up to the skies.
2 weeks before the Mothman was ever officially seen, a salesman named Woody Derenberger was driving his van home on a dark, rainy night. He's totally alone on the road. Suddenly, this bizarre craft cuts him off, forcing him to slam on his brakes as it hovers silently just above the wet asphalt. Woody described it as charcoal-colored and shaped remarkably like the bulbous glass chimney of an old-fashioned kerosene lamp. There were no exhaust fumes, no engine noise whatsoever. Then, a door on the side of the craft slides open, and a man steps right out into the rain. This encounter completely shifts us from a standard cryptid tale to a mind-bending extraterrestrial event, largely because of how utterly bizarre this visitor looked. He walks up to Woody's truck wearing a dark coat over a metallic green shirt. He's got a complexion Woody described as super tan and an unnaturally wide grin that was practically glued to his face. It didn't look friendly at all. It looked completely artificial. And even stranger, the guy kept his arms firmly crossed with his hands tucked completely out of sight under his armpits the entire time he stood there. But here is the absolutely crucial detail. This grinning man, who introduced himself as Cold, never actually opened his mouth. He communicated entirely telepathically. Woody could literally feel the man's thoughts echoing inside his own head, assuring him they meant no harm. Cold asked a few seemingly mundane questions about local towns while just hovering there on the highway. And Woody wasn't the only witness. Other passing motorists later confirmed to authorities that they saw a van stopped on the road with a strange figure standing next to it. Cold then promised to return, stepped back into his floating cylinder, and vanished straight up into the night sky.
Section 3. Paranoia and the Fake Secretary. Plunging even deeper into the iceberg, we hit the absolute climax of the paranoia that blanketed this region, the Men in Black. And I definitely don't mean the charming, wisecracking Hollywood version. I'm talking about deeply unsettling, highly intrusive visitors showing up completely uninvited at witnesses' front doors.
The standard reports of these visitors were terrifying enough. We're talking awkward men, either extremely pale or artificially tanned, speaking in monotonous, computer-like voices, and wearing cheap, ill-fitting suits completely inappropriate for the weather. They acted like they had literally never interacted with human beings before. But there was a completely different, highly organized tactic also being deployed in Point Pleasant. To silence people, enter the fake secretary.
This unknown woman was executing a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation. She was identifying and interviewing UFO witnesses to steal their stories before they were even made public. She was described as an attractive, highly confident blonde woman in her 30s who would walk right up, knock on doors, and claim to be the secretary for John Keel, the famous UFO journalist investigating Point Pleasant at the time. People trusted Keel, right? So they let her into their homes. She used a clipboard to collect highly personal, sensitive information under the guise of research. The truly chilling reality here? John Keel didn't even have a secretary. She was an absolute imposter, and to this day, literally no one knows who she was working for.
Section 4. What is high strangeness? We have finally reached the darkest, deepest waters of our explainer. When you combine all of these elements, the
The monsters, the UFOs, the telepathy, the phantom secretaries, you cross a major threshold in paranormal research. You move past isolated events into something far, far more complex.
This is exactly what researchers call high strangeness, and it perfectly defines what Point Pleasant experienced over a relentless 13-month period. This wasn't just a town that saw a weird bird in the woods. No, it became a localized epicenter of impossible, overlapping phenomena. The very rules of reality seemed to break down. Witnesses didn't just see a UFO and then go on with their lives. They saw glowing orbs hovering over their homes, and then their telephones started ringing with dead silence or mechanical voices on the other end. They'd encounter the Mothman, and then violent poltergeists would start throwing pots and pans around their kitchens.
Breaking down the events into these specific layers, you can clearly see how an isolated monster sighting was actually just one symptom of a massive reality-bending outbreak. You've got the cryptid layer, with Mothman terrorizing teenagers and Newell Partridge's poor dog Bandit vanishing into the night. Then you have the extraterrestrial layer, with the grinning injured cold communicating telepathically outside a floating kerosene lamp. And
Right. Yeah. So, do you know what I find really odd about that? The overview there is with injured cold. So, Keel was fascinated with him,
Right.
and rightly so. So, look, it's so absurd. A lot of these sightings, a lot of these interactions that people have are, kind of across the board, just absolutely bonkers absurd. And they're presented to people in such a manner that, it's almost as if the entities want it to be unrecountable. Or if you do recount it, you'll be classified as loop the loop, just crazy. Just crazy. It's never presented in a manner which is logical,
Right.
a way in which kind of normal. Injured cold. Now, it's one thing to, and this is why I think that the testimony of people is completely right, because it is so absurd. And I think they are absolutely 100% telling the truth, because it is so crazy. And the reason I say that is because when he met Indrid and he said, it's bad enough actually putting your hand up and saying, I saw a guy coming out of what looked like an oil lamp UFO. But it's another thing completely, to say that he didn't speak vocally, he spoke with his mind. Now, that, if you wanted to be halfway believable and you wanted to kind of tell a tale, right, tell a lie, you would automatically say, right, okay, it's unbelievable enough that he came out of a UFO shaped oil lamp. I'm going to tell people that he actually spoke to me. But no, this witness didn't. He went one step beyond on the absurd. No, he didn't speak to me. He actually used a type of telepathy. He spoke to my mind. That's what makes it more credible in my eyes.
The Indrid Cold thing is another one of these cans of worms. The initial experience seems like there may have been something to it. There were people that said they saw Woodrow Derenberger talking to somebody on the road. There are others that even said they saw the craft rise and fall. So I don't know. Now, later on, I think he embellished some of the story. He wrote a self-published book called Visitors from Lanulos, which is where Indrid Cold was supposed to have hailed from. And some of that stuff was pretty wild. But here's the thing. There was another Indrid Cold-like encounter that happened before Woodrow Derenberger came out and talked to the police and went all over the news. This man, unidentified, came to John Keel and Mary Hythe first. He said, I just got to tell somebody about this experience, because he started drinking again, and he was driving down the same road, Route 77, encountered the same type of craft, kind of elongated, like you said, the kerosene lamp with the widening in the center and tapering at each end. And it stopped and engaged in these really mundane, pointless conversations. And then he took off. And so he was going to come forward with the story. And then shortly after, he called, talked to John Keel and said, you know what, we're just not going to run it. He was in the truck with another person. And Keel said, well, why? He said, well, you know, that scientist fella said we should just forget all about it. And he said, what scientist fella? And he said, well, I don't know. He seemed to know what he was talking about. And Keel said, well, how did he know about your encounter? The only people you told was Mary Hyre and myself. And he said, damned if I know. So, and then Keel shelved it because it was a complete blind item. And then the Woodrow Derenberger story came out where he encountered something just like that on the same road. Some months later, another woman, I think he identifies as Mrs. Bryant in Gallipolis, which is just across the river. She was a nurse. She was leaving work. It was late. Another one of these elongated craft kind of comes down. Two men get out in coveralls, very kind of Indrid Cold types. Another pointless conversation. Who are you? Where do you work? And so forth. And then she was actually paralyzed. She couldn't move. And then they went away. And then she asked John Keel, she was very concerned. She said, did that man, meaning Woodrow Derenberger, ever say he saw that person again? And Keel said, well, he said he did. He said he had several encounters. And she said, well, I saw them again. I saw them sometime later in downtown Gallipolis in street clothes. She passed them on the street, she said, and they kind of nodded at her like, oh, yeah, we've seen you before. Freaked her out. She was living on a farm that had apparitions, classic haunting phenomena, cattle mutilations, and her son was seeing these large sort of boxcar-like UFOs flying over the property. So again, it was such a three-ring, maybe a six-ring circus of the paranormal going on all over the Ohio Valley.
Yeah.
And it doesn't answer our questions about Indrid Cold.
No, it's I think what makes it crazy is because he's so human-like. That's what's the crazy part. Is it's so human-like, and just little things. You know, when they say a green reflective shirt underneath his jacket, and it's like kind of just there's that almost like clown aspect, the comical aspect. Like they can't quite, whatever these entities are, they can't quite mimic us. They can't quite get it right. There's a side to it which they're just like you can imagine Indrid Cold in the spaceship going, right, okay, I'm gonna go meet this guy, right? And I need to get dressed up so that we look like him. Okay, well, get that suit on. All right, well, what we're gonna wear? They wear shirts, don't they? Yeah, they do wear shirts. Here, that get that green one, the reflective one. I've seen a lot of them wear that. Yeah, get that reflective one. You know,
right. The other ones are the cleaners, right?
Yeah, yeah. Just really, they can't quite, and in the way that they communicate, like a lot of the Men in Black communication, it is kind of robotic. It's almost it's almost childlike. There's a childlike sense to it, you know, when you like hear some of the communication that I've heard with recordings of telephone calls from entities,
right?
Is actual, you know, are actually the same. You know, the voices are naive to the point of knowing emotion, knowing any form of human emotional response or fear, or they're oblivious to it, which I find really odd. Find very odd.
You mentioned the TV interference with Merle Partridge. Well, there was another family on Camp Conley Road. Camp Conley is kind of the southern end of the TNT area. The TNT area was the West Virginia Ordnance Works, where they made explosives during World War II. It was a huge complex back then, mostly dismantled. It's been nicknamed the TNT area forever. It's the McClintock Wildlife Area now, And we even have directions on how you can get out there from the Mothman Museum and see the general area where the Mothman was seen a few times. But anyway, the Lilly family, they had the same situation. They knew it when their TV was acting up. They go outside and they see these strange lights passing overhead. They had one of the little girls, one of the daughters, had a sort of an apparition of kind of like a man in black apparition showing up in her bedroom. You know, these bedroom apparitions that show up. They had poltergeist phenomena. They had doors slamming inside the house. So that this whole area was affected. And I just talked to a guy last night that I know that lives on Camp Conley Road, and or just off Camp Conley. And I said, anything strange going on there these days? He said, absolutely nothing. What a disappointment.
Yeah. What's the most common question when you get people coming to the conference, or you get people coming to the museum? What's the most common, would you say, question? Which, you know, is there like kind of a question which people ask that, you know, you yourself would ask the same thing?
Well, they want to know if their people are still seeing the Mothman. And I haven't really kept track of those sightings. Jeff Wansley gets people over the years that said they have seen something like that. So, but his heyday was the 60s. You know, there's been nothing like that since. And, you know, if John Keel was onto something, and this is something people should check out if they read his books, John Keel did not think these things were necessarily permanently physical. He thought they may be paraphysical or manifestations. He used the term ultra-terrestrial because he kind of wanted to get away from the idea of them simply being from other planets. And he talked about transmogrifications of energy. Now, if these things are coming from, and he thought also that they were it was like paranormal mimicry, that we might, because of our general belief systems, might be possibly partly fashioning these apparitions. You know, people that saw the Mothman, they didn't always see this winged humanoid. Some just saw a big sort of a ugly bird. Tom Urey, one of the original witnesses, saw essentially a thunderbird, a giant bird with about a 10 or 12 foot wingspan. He said it wasn't an osprey, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. He said, I'll take a lie detector test. So these things might be coming possibly from the same source, but manifesting slightly different depending on, you and I were talking about John Keel and how he was ahead of his time before we started the show.
Yeah.
There was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, we know for Sherlock Holmes. He was a paranormal investigator. He wrote a book called The Coming of the Fairies. And he believed that these elementals were real, but he said the appearance of the fairies is largely dependent on the person viewing them. It may be, I would have loved for John Keel and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to have been able to talk to each other, or maybe write a book together, you know.
Can you imagine?
But, you know, that sounds like very Keelian. And it may be that we shouldn't categorize these things like unknown animals. In fact, I'm not even sure that Mothman is a proper cryptid. A cryptid is a flesh and blood animal that's undocumented, that's been hidden, and eventually, hopefully, will be discovered. So I'm just not sure that fits with Mothman. Pardon me. The best description I heard of where these things might come from, Dr. Donald Owman, who is an interesting character that got together with Ted Holliday, who was a Loch Ness researcher, and wanted to exercise the Loch Ness monster. Dr. Donald Owman called this the phantom menagerie. And I kind of like that term. It's like these things kind of come out of this paranormal orc cloud, so to speak. And Keel talks about them in the Eighth Tower, that they seem to show up, manifest, leave footprints sometimes, even hair samples, sometimes attack livestock, and then just sort of melt away. So it really, although, you know, in later years, Keel gave an interview to Richard Toronto. Richard Toronto did a fanzine based on the so-called Shaver mystery, and that was the guy that claimed he had been captured for several years by the Darrow, a degenerate race deep within the earth. And but anyway, in that interview, Keel backtracked a little bit because by the end of the 60s, he had completely rejected the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But later on, he backtracked a little bit and thought, well, he said, look, there's likely more than one answer to these things, and that's what I agree with. I think it's possible that some of these entities, beings, or whatever, are actually flesh and blood, but remain hidden. Perhaps they go through portals or windows to get away from us. I don't know. But there is this element of the paranormal. If you look through Albert Rosales has an amazing database of humanoid reports. He has about 15 books out that go from 01 AD all the way up to 2015. He chronicles all kinds of encounters with the others amongst us, he calls them, these entities. Some of them sound very Keelian, very ethereal, more like something Jacques Vallée or John Keel would write about. Others seem like they may very well be flesh and blood entities coming from some other realm, maybe even another planet. So it's just you know, we it's like you and I were talking before. You felt like you come to this like a brick wall or a dead end every once in a while, and you wonder, why do we even bother? Why do we do this? Because the answers are so elusive.
They are, and I think so Arthur Conan Doyle, and also John Keel, I think completely right when they came up with a theory, both the same really, that these entities that we see, whether across the board, across the spectrum of supernatural, that encompasses aliens, ghosties, cryptids, which, by the way, I think a lot of cryptids, using that same analogy of, I don't know whether or not Mothman is a cryptid or not, classification, because the same could be put for Dogman, because obviously it's 1 minute it's there, 1 minute it's gone. It's got some of the same traits as a lot of cryptids, which accompanying smell, eyes that seem to glow, and there's no foundational material evidence found.
Right.
You know, same for Bigfoot. You know, so I think all of these we can kind of like clump together. Well, you know, under the same umbrella. Are they flesh and blood, or are they something else? When it comes to something else, I think you are quite right, especially with the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and the fairy lore and the fairies he was fascinated with, the Cottingdale fairies, I think it was.
Oh yeah.
I'm probably wrong about that, Cottingdale, I'm sure it was, but and it was proven that a hoax, that the girls were messing around with cutouts of fairies, except for one photograph. And there was one photograph that was taken where the girls didn't have a chance to make any cutouts, and there was this fairy which was going up to one of the girls and just pointing to her.
Well, they did claim that they had actually seen some of these entities, and when they, even though they admitted that they used these cutouts for some of the pictures.
Yeah, that's right. I think that with these entities, they're completely, so Arthur Conan Doyle and John Keel is very much dependent. There's a relationship, a symbiotic relationship between us and the paranormal. It's just the patterns we don't understand. It's almost like the communication, the avenue of communication with these supernatural entities across the board are so very different, so very divergent from our own understanding, that it just seems bizarre to us. Now, we may seem bizarre to them. That's why they don't fully understand and can't communicate properly. And a lot of times, like with fairy lore, they were uh, uh, kept underground, and they
Right.
weren't just little tiny fairies. They were huge, ginormous things,
Right. Right.
and they were quite evil
Yep.
fairies originally, in
They
the
weren't the
old.
friendly little fairies of Walt Disney.
Yeah, no, then definitely not a Tinkerbell. No. And they were kept underground and capped with a seal. There was a seal placed over the top. Um, and they were ground dwelling. They never wanted to be. Their world was overtaken by the world of man, and they hated men for that. When you go back into the old mythology of it.
Very quickly, you mentioned Dogman. I was spent time on Lee Hample's property. Lee Hample is in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. He teamed up with Linda Godfrey that was writing the books on the Dogman, and his property is another mini high strangeness area. It's like a little Skinwalker Ranch. He has seen the Dogman. He's had missing time. He's captured amazing things on cameras. Linda Godfrey wrote one time in one of her books about a guy in upstate New York. He's driving along. He sees this orb of light. He thinks it's a four-wheeler, a guy driving recklessly. And the light comes to the road and turns into a Dogman-like creature and scales the road in about 3 steps. Another thing Linda Godfrey came across was a book on southern Wisconsin's effigy mounds. There's some great effigy mounds out there that I've seen. She looked at she'd been chronicling these Dogman sightings, and they were in clusters. And she found by accident one time that many of these clustered Dogman sightings were overlapping almost perfectly with these effigy mounds. Now, is that a coincidence? There's a passage in the Mothman Prophecies where John Keel muses about the mounds, the so-called Indian mounds that have been here forever. He said, what came first, the strange lights, and they built the mounds, or did the mounds come and did the lights represent some kind of a, residue of the collective consciousness, or a tulpa or something like that? But again, your point is well taken, that the Dogman doesn't seem to be a completely flesh and blood unknown creature either. So
Flip that.
Another mystery.
It is, yes. It is a absolute strange one. I mean, I started this channel because of my interaction, my interactions with Dogman. After seeing them. Yeah, that's why I sort of like started it. It wasn't a video
No.
it was just a vocal podcast where I was just basically accounting my experiences, because in the vain hope that someone out there would be going through the same, or have been through the same, and maybe it would help them, or to know that they're not alone. That's all I was doing. And then it kind of, I got an influx of people that said, oh, we've had the same, we've seen the same, and it just sort of proliferated from there, and it grew into a video podcast thing, so I'm very lucky. I also wanted to ask, 3 years, but I don't know how aware you are that in the UK we have our own Mothman.
Is it the Owlman of Cornwall?
Yeah, Owlman of Mawnan, but also 3 years before Point Pleasant encounter,
Yes.
the Hythe Mothman was sighted in Kent, England, complete with glowing oval lights and a headless winged figure. Keel even wrote about this in his book Strange Creatures from Time and Space.
And that, in fact, is the closest, even though it didn't have red glowing eyes, that's the closest entity, apparition, whatever you want to call it, to the Point Pleasant Mothman. The other winged creatures, and there are many of them reported, don't quite have that same. I mean, it even shuffled along on the ground like the Mothman did in November of '66.
That's what I was going to ask you, Steve. Do you think these global sightings are the same entity?
Well, again, they may be coming from the same source, but just maybe manifesting a little bit differently sometimes. Paul Sinclair, Paul Sinclair, I wanted to mention him briefly. He talks about the Dogman in a documentary that he created. He was interviewed on my show, a really interesting guy. But Paul Devereaux has written books about Earth energies, and he talks about that particular sighting of the Mothman near Kent, England. And he said at first it did appear like a light, and the light, I think, disappeared, and then this thing appeared. He talks about something called proto-entities. And in some cases, people will see the light or the craft or whatever it was, but that object sort of morphs into the entity or the humanoid or whatever. So it's like sometimes the creature, the cryptid, the humanoid isn't separate from the original light that they see. And I find that fascinating. But, if you look, I mean, we had in the 1950s, we had something called the Houston Batman. In the early 2000s, Linda Godfrey covered the Wisconsin Man Bat. It was seen by a father and son. This big, ugly bat-like thing didn't look like the Mothman. Brushed up against the windshield. They got very sick afterwards. We even have something that shows up occasionally in the Northwest called bat squatch. Now, if our Mothman here had a lot of problems. It had maybe a 10-foot wingspan, maybe not enough to lift a 6-7 foot man. It didn't always flap its wings. People had poltergeist outbreaks when they saw it afterwards, when they went home. A lot of strange things associated with it. I'm not sure what wing spread you would need to lift a Sasquatch off the road. If these are real sightings, it suggests that it may be paranormal and not an unknown flesh and blood creature.
Yeah, no, well said. That's quite true. There's been a few which are just really. I mean, I find another one that's really odd is the Van Meter visitor. That the Van Meter visitor was emitted a blinding beam of light from a blunt horn on its forehead.
Was that Van Meter?
Yeah, Van Meter. Yeah.
You know where I'm going the weekend after the Mothman Festival? I will be at the Van Meter Visitor Festival as the MC. I've been there for several years, and I know I know the gentleman that wrote the great book, The Van Meter Visitor. Let's see, Chad Lewis, Kevin Nelson, and Noah Voss.
Oh, I tell you what, right? Do us a favor when you meet them. Tell them about my show.
Okay.
And put them in contact on my messenger.
Okay. Yeah, they're on Facebook, and they've spoken at the Mothman Festival before. They're great guys, and they help run the Van Meter Visitor Festival.
Wow, I bet that's brilliant. I bet that is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it was a week. The week at the end of September, some very prominent people in town saw this pterodactyl-like creature, but like you said, it had the strange light on its beak or whatever with the horn. It also gave off some kind of vapor at one point where somebody had missing time. It's almost like one of these humanoids from a UFO that gave. They would have lights on their chest or whatever. You'd have missing time, perhaps in a different form or shape or whatever. But it's it's great the way these little towns embrace their local monsters.
It is, yes, I know. That's another thing which I kind of since the tragic Silver Bridge collapse in '67, Mothman's always been labelled a harbinger of doom.
Right.
However, local law and the museum treat him almost like a hometown hero today. Basically, it's not exactly a hero, but is an icon of the town. He's what Point Pleasant is really known, worldwide known for. How was the town's relationship with the creature how has the town's relationship evolved since the events of 1960? Would you
Well,
say?
it has evolved. I mean, for for years you had the devastation of the economic devastation, along with the loss of all those people that were. And at first, when they when the festival started, I think the people really didn't care for it much. And it does mess up traffic for the weekend. But over the years, more people have become to embrace it. Jeff Wamsley, his family, his friends. Now, he doesn't hire out a bunch of professionals to run this. They run this every year, and it has revitalized the town. I have to mention Carolyn Harris. She was the co-founder of the festival. She's no longer with us. Great lady, pillar of the community. She ran Harris's Diner, that was also known as the Mothman Diner, and she had a tragedy. She lost her son, was traveling the bridge that night with her ex-husband, and he was just a young boy. But nevertheless, over the years, she knew that if they were to create, she saw the devastation of the town, and she put the tragedy aside, and she helped build this great festival over the years. And again, over 30,000 flowing through. Good luck getting lodging and a place to park, but people will find places an hour away to stay there. So, but it's worth it. I mean, up and down Main Street, you've got T-shirts, food on the next to the museum where the Mothman statue is. Most of the speakers have their tables there and their books. They're very accessible. They speak on the north end of town. But ladies and gentlemen, the last thing I would need to drive home, if you go to the Mothman Festival, get there early Saturday morning. Get your ticket for the Mothman Hayride. We take people into the dreaded TNT area, and we have 3 tractors and 3 carts. It's like a proper hayride. And the Men in Black try to turn you away. We've got not quite genuine Men in Black, but they've got bullhorns. They try to tell you this is a restrictive area to turn around, that sort of thing. I go in ahead of time and set up some monsters I've cobbled together, and there's a flyover, guaranteed flyover of the Mothman. My buddies John and Tim take down the Mothman. It's up in the ceiling in the museum. They run him down a wire, and they have an ingenious hand crank, low tech delivery system, and they even blast a sound effect. So it's just it's a creepy area anyway, and it's just a lot of fun. Stand in line and get your ticket, $5 ticket for the Mothman Hayride.
Cool. All right. What's better than that? Brilliant. I'd tell you what, if I didn't have to go through all the torture of getting on a plane, I'd like to go one day. I would love to meet you one day and go.
That'd be great.
I really would. That'd be so cool. Really so cool. I'm just looking through before we finish at any questions. Remember, people, just put a big Q in front of the questions, and we'll have a look and see. You got any questions for Steve? That'd be brilliant. Just want to say thank you very much indeed to Squatch Sister. Have there been any recent sightings?
Not that I'm aware of. They would people would normally go to Jeff Wamsley and tell him. He's got a 3rd book coming out, by the way, where he has the 2 original books, Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend, and Mothman Behind the Red Eyes. In the more recent book, he has re-interviewed Roger Scarberry, the man driving the car that night. Roger came forward after over 50 years of being quiet, and he said, "Jeff, I'm tired of people telling my story and getting it wrong." Jeff said, "Roger, just tell me, did it really happen?" And he said, "It scared the hell out of us." So he's going to have 3 interviews of some of the original witnesses in this new book, which won't be out, unfortunately, till next year.
Okay. Right. Oh, must get that though. Right. Squatch Sister says, "Is it true there were sightings of Mothman, I guess, in the UK?" Well, I can't say it's true, but there have been accounts. Yes, there have been accounts by different people. It's been by young people, young girls in Mawnan that saw these. But they're the most famous ones. But yeah, and I think like Steve says, I think it's a lot of it has to do with us. We're kind of the key to this whole puzzle. We've just got to find out what the avenue of communication is. Once we break that, I think we'll be okay. Um, can't help wonder if Mothman is actually an angel.
Some people do claim that it's a protector. There's some people that claim that if they saw it manifest in their bedroom, they thought it was a demon. So who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's once again, it's like different interpretations dependent upon the witness. A lot of times the witnesses say they get this over. This goes for a lot of cryptids. They're taken over by this fear and dread, which comes over them when they see these, right from Dogman, right, Bigfoot, Mothman. It's a strange, very, very strange thing. Yeah. You're not going to give up on this. You're going to keep on researching, I guess, Steve.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm even allegedly writing a book, but that's going slow. I do a lot of speaking on different subjects, and I have my own podcast, The High Strangeness Factor, on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Got a good backlog of reports. Andy Mercer of Britain and Susie Bastille from Connecticut are my co-hosts. So,
Andy Mercer, yeah, he's been on our show. Yeah, he's been
real
on our
good
show.
guy. Yep,
he's a lovely guy, wealth of knowledge. My word,
Oh, yeah.
that guy's brain.
and
Something else.
and he's my producer. If I don't have Andy, nobody hears my show.
Yeah, he rocks. He really does rock. Honestly, he had my head in a spin. Some of the stuff he was coming out with, the knowledge that guy's got. Andy's lovely, nice guy, really nice guy. Okay, Steve. Listen, want to thank you very much for being on. If you could stay on, that's great. I just want to have a couple of minutes with you.
Okay.
Everyone else that's been watching, I appreciate you. I'll just give a quick shout out in the comments. Let's have a look. We've got Hope 9209. They said something else is often described as divine, especially when it comes to Sasquatch and wolf dog people. Mothman reminds me of a doomsday entity or major catastrophe entity. Yeah. Ready Steady Retro, Sasquatch Sister, Dawn, hello. Kate, of course, thank you very much, Kate, as well, for gems and the contribution to her channel. Very helpful, do appreciate you. We also got Spring Hill Jack.
That's me. Spring Hill
that's
Jack
you.
Ward.
So Spring Hill Jack
to,
Ward, lovely. Okay.
I really have to change that, but
no, that's fine. That's okay. That's good. I like the name, Spring Hill Jack. That's another entity which is very, very odd. Spring Hill Jack. Yeah, Kate, Ready Steady Retro. Thank you very much for being on. Lovely seeing you. Delroy Kelly. Hello, Delroy. There we go. Thank you very much for being in the chat. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for the gems as well from Sasquatch Sister Dawn. Much appreciated. But got the chat's been very, very, very busy. You guys have been busy. I've got Ord, Lord of Ord. He's a nice guy as well. Yeah, Ord. He's hey Ord. Daniel Williams as well. Yeah. Hello, Daniel. Yeah, no, it's lovely. I really do appreciate everyone that's been in the chat and contributed. It's very much so many people. It's well over 120, 130, I think, so far in the chat.
And my thanks too. I appreciate them being here.
Yeah, and where can they reach you again? So you got Mothman Museum.
Right.
What's your podcast?
The High Strangeness Factor. It's one of the many on the Paranormal UK radio network. And there's a backlog of about 6 years. We've been on a little bit of hiatus, just had one not too long ago. And it's going to be starting up on a regular basis soon. Once I get through these 2 festivals. And also, you can get me on Facebook. Just type in Steve Ward. You may need to type in Point Pleasant, but you'll find me. And I'm also co-authored a book with Mark Randall. It's called Mothman High Strangeness. It's more of a booklet. It has Mark Randall's great art in it, great graphic art. It chronicles the year of the Garuda, the year of the Mothman, and he and I wrote the pieces for it. So
is that on?
You can get that on Amazon. Mark Randall.
Oh, Mark Randall. Okay, let's have a look. Just so I can get it up for people, because this will be popular. Mark Randall.
Yeah, and it's Mothman High Strangeness. He'll have if you type in his name, a lot of artwork will come up as well. A lot of his books and prints.
Okay, let's have a look. Aha, yes. Oh, right, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
He's really good. He's got books devoted to Mothman sightings, the Men in Black, and he's done a lot of book covers for various paranormal books.
Right. Okay. Let me get that up just to show people, because it is worth showing. Okay. Right. This is it.
Yes,
right
that's
here. Okay, then that's good. Now that is available. Yep, that is.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to get that myself. X basket on that one. Right. Good. So yeah, everyone make your way over. There it is. Mark A. Randall with Steve Ward, Mothman High Strangeness. Check that book out. And yeah, Mothman Museum as well. The website is here. I'll get the website up for you, just so that you people know. All the links are going to be in the description. I'm going to add in the links for the podcast, because
you just scrolled past a picture. There's a Mothman is right there. He's hanging up in the museum. He's the one that has taken down John and Tim Frick, hide behind the old acid plant, and they run him down a wire. Like I say, it's this hand crank delivery system they developed. Light up his eyes with battery power, and they blast a sound effect from a couple of speakers. It's really awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. You know, that's what I love. If there's one thing that comes out of this, a positive, and that is it's a focal point for the whole town, and it's helping the town in a way. Inadvertently, it may have been a harbinger of doom and disaster, but do you know what? It's had a flip side, which has been good as well, and I think it's probably brought people together.
Oh, it certainly has. And I have to say, knock on wood, everybody at the festival, even among the thousands of people, they're always well behaved. There's no drunken fights or anything like that. It all seems to go very smoothly.
Yeah. Until you get there, Steve. Is that right?
I know, but I go in disguise, so I don't ruffle anybody's tail feathers.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Do appreciate it. This has been Friday Night Files on Dogman Teepee Hunting with Steve Ward from the Mothman Museum, Point Pleasant, and we will have him on again very soon. Thank you, Steve. Right. Okay. And for me, just wanted to say have a great weekend. My light went up there. It's a battery pack on the light, so it just like that. Once it goes, then it's got this like mysterious air about me. But yeah, don't be scared. It's only me. Well, actually, yeah, probably be scared. But right. Thank you very much. Have a great, lovely weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and see you again very soon. All right. Take care.
I know what I saw out there.